Okay, so first things first, we need a can of young green jackfruit. Now this is just young green jackfruit in brine. If you do fresh jackfruit, it's gonna taste sweet. Young green jackfruit is gonna taste like meat, very plain meat, but that's what we're here to do today, is to make it taste even more like meat. Now, this one specifically is a 20-ounce can. Most cans of jackfruit I have found are 20-ounce cans. First thing that we're gonna wanna do is just wash it and then kind of mash up the hard ends with your thumbs. We're gonna wanna break those up pretty fine and try to remove as many seeds as possible. There's no seeds in steak, so we wanna make sure that we remove those. Now this recipe is specifically a recipe that I am experimenting with that is in my upcoming cookbook, Making Vegan Meat, the Plant-Based Food Science Cookbook. It's coming out July 20th. You can pre-order it now. I'll leave a link below. I'm so excited for it. The basis of the book is pretty much experimentation. I gave a bunch of my base recipes and then you can experiment, add, twist, and tweak. So that's what we're doing today. We're gonna be taking my seitan steak and we're gonna be adding jackfruit into it to see if it just ups the level of texture. Now you can see at this point, this looks a heck of a lot more like a mashed chicken than it ever is gonna look like any sort of steak. But all I'm doing is just taking a potato masher and just trying to make sure that all of those ends are really nice and kind of broken down. All we're trying to get out of this is the texture of the jackfruit. These little fibrous bits is what's gonna make this, I think, elevated. I think it's gonna make it different. I think these things are gonna hold on to some more juice. We're also popping some seeds out here. Like I said, you don't want those seeds. If there's any of those big chunks when you go to knead the gluten together, those big chunks will just fall out. They're not gonna hold on really well. Okay, at this point we have most of our jackfruit mashed and I think the texture is gonna be perfect. I'm pretty excited about this. And I also believe that we got most of the seeds out. If we didn't, you'll see it when we put the seitan in here, when we put the gluten in here. So I'm gonna throw this into a saucepan and we're gonna add some liquids to season this up. 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 3 tablespoons of black vinegar. Now, black vinegar I introduced a few videos ago, but this is a black vinegar from Taiwan. This has a very specific flavor. It tastes like A1 sauce. So in this recipe, I'm replacing Marmite, which is like a yeast extract, and I'm replacing vinegar. When you mix those two together, you get a very steaky flavor. So we're just gonna replace those two, because I'm out of Marmite, with this black vinegar. I think it's gonna come out wild. 1 tablespoon mushroom extract powder, 1 teaspoon liquid smoke, 1 tablespoon blackstrap molasses. It's gonna give it its irony flavor. And then we're gonna add about 1/2 cup of water. Now all we wanna do is just bring that to a boil. And once it comes to a boil, drop it down to about a simmer, throw the lid on, and let's let that boil for about 20 minutes. So quick question, how do you stay up to date with the latest news? Is it social media, like news apps, television, YouTube? I mean, what is it? I know for me, I was getting legitimately frustrated with the news that was available online and on TV. It's really difficult to find unbiased news sources, and it shouldn't be that hard. And that's why I wanted to tell you about today's sponsor. 1440 is your all-in-one source of impartial, quickly digestible news. We all have limited time, we're all busy, we don't have time to search around and dig for what's real and accurate, what's not slanted in one way or another. And that's why the creators of 1440, Andrew and Tim, set out to create a view of the latest news and updates in the world without the clickbait and spin. Now, I've been a huge fan of the variety of articles that I've been reading on 1440. The Need to Know articles cover the latest and potentially most influential events. And they also cover sports, science, business news. And sometimes they'll even dive into the slightly unusual, the really interesting news articles. I really enjoyed that. That's one of my favorites. And all you have to do is go to join1440.com/SauceStache and enter your email address to get started today. It's free. It's totally free. So gang, get informed without all of the BS and click the link in my description below to subscribe to 1440 today for free. I am really enjoying having honest, uncompromising facts in my news. Okay, it's been 20 minutes. The house is smelling like steak. It is mind-blowing. This looks like steak. I mean, just look at this. Look at this. Okay, so we're gonna save this jackfruit. I'm gonna pour it through a large colander into like a heat-safe container because I wanna save those juices. The juices that we just boiled with is going to make up the flavor of this steak all the way through. So at this point, I'm just gonna set this to the side. I want my jackfruit to cool down just a little bit. I don't want it to be super hot when we're mixing in the seitan. It's not gonna make a huge difference, but I just don't want it to be off the boil. Now, I'm gonna do this in a stand mixer. You don't have to. I just wanna be able to knead this together really fast, and it also gonna help up It also kind of helps break up the jackfruit even more and kind of separate it and pull it through the gluten. So I'm gonna add 1 cup of vital wheat gluten along with a 1/4 cup of chickpea flour. Now, if you don't have chickpea flour, you can actually substitute that for about, almost a 1/4 cup of any sort of like protein, like pea protein, and then just a little bit of starch, maybe like a tablespoon of tapioca starch. That'll work really well. That's actually how I make my ribs, to make them a little bit more chewy. For the steak, I want the moisture, holding capabilities. So I'm just gonna mix together the chickpea flour and the gluten just with my dough hook here. I'm gonna throw the dough hook on, and then we're gonna add our jackfruit and mix that in. If you're doing this by hand, just do the same thing. Mix together your chickpea flour and your vital wheat gluten, and then just add in your jackfruit, make a mess. And then we're gonna knead these together for just a few minutes. We haven't added any of our liquid yet. I'm gonna measure this out. 1/2 cup. So I have exactly 1/2 cup of liquid remaining. If you don't have 1/2 cup of liquid remaining, then all you have to do is just add some water to it. It's okay to thin it down a little bit. A lot of that flavor, it's gonna be cooked down, it's still gonna all be there. Now, while it's still running, once you see all those clumps have formed, the jackfruit is kind of forming up with that gluten, just start adding a little bit of your flavoring at a time and allow that to kind of bring it together before you add more. You might not need that whole 1/2 cup. So we're just gonna let that knead together for about 20 minutes. Once that's kneaded, we're gonna pull it out and probably give it a good press by hand for a few minutes, just to really tighten it up. Once that's all tightened up, all we need to do is just wrap it up, throw it in the fridge for an hour, and then we'll come back and cook it. Now that's at least an hour. That's just to let the gluten kind of rest. If you let it rest overnight, you're probably gonna end up with an even better steak. If you let it rest for a night and a half, you're probably gonna end up with an even better steak. But at least an hour, I think, is gonna give us the texture that we need to make this very sticky. Okay, we just took our strip steaks out of the fridge. That coating, that last minute decision to coat these in that coconut oil, I think was a smart decision. Now, right now these steaks aren't looking like much, but I'm gonna get my pan heated hot. I want this pan heated really hot, just to give the outside a quick sear. It's gonna melt that coconut oil off. And now I'm just gonna kind of push in this salt. We want these salted, peppered, and some garlic salt on both sides. Let's throw these in the pan, give them a sear on both sides for just a few minutes. We're gonna kick the heat down after they're seared, and then we're gonna pour in the remainder of our broth. Hopefully you still have a little bit of that broth left. If you used all of it, well then just mix up some of those ingredients in the beginning. At this point, I have about probably a 1/4 cup left. I know this wasn't like something I was thinking of, but now I'm doing it now. I'm gonna probably add about 2 cups, or about 1.5 cups of water, and we're gonna pour that broth over these steaks and allow them to simmer in the broth fat. We're gonna cover it up and let these guys simmer for about 20 or 30 minutes. They should be good after 20, 30 minutes, kind of constantly flipping. We wanna make sure that they don't dry out. These need to be juicy steaks. Okay, I let these simmer for about 30 minutes or so. Once we cut this, we'll have some of that seasoning and really season these steaks up. But I'm telling you, these things look just phenomenal. Now I'm gonna let these rest before I slice into them. We're gonna want them to rest because that gluten and everything needs to kind of calm down. The heat has probably added some air bubbles to it, puffed it up just a little bit. We don't want that in our steak. I am so stoked for this. I mean, just beyond stoked.
This looks like steak.
Okay, baby. I mean, look at these things.
Yeah, they look awesome.
I mean, first impression, what do you think?
Steak.
Steak, right? I know. Let's give it a try.
Okay, here we go.
Let's do it.
Cheers.
Ooh. Cheers.
This is awesome.
Right? Wow, it really is good.
Yeah, it's very meaty.
Yeah, it's very meaty.
It has a nice bite to it. It's got a nice savory flavor.
And it's mild.
It's mild, it's firm. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah. This would make a great steak replacement.
For sure.
I mean, you could do it steakhouse style with like some potatoes,
Yeah.
a nice sauce on top,
Asparagus.
asparagus. I think the other thing that you could do too is probably, make this base, and where like I sauteed it for a little bit, you might be able to actually I kind of did like almost like a braise. But you could do it like, I think this would be good like in a burrito or in a fajita, like very like fajita-like steak.
Yeah, and you could like put it in a taco. That would
Yeah,
be
in a
good
taco.
too.
Or even like, I wonder, can I slice it like super thin to get like steak and cheese?
What about
slices?
like a gyro? That would be good.
Oh, totally. And you can, yeah, you could slice this like paper thin. I mean, and that did. That really did.